Tonight, Barack Obama arrives in Afghanistan for his first close-up look at the rising battle there. I'm Forrest Sawyer. Also tonight, the U.S. issues a warning to Iran after today's talks on its nuclear program come up empty. Could your bank be on the brink of failure? We'll show you a little-known financial formula which could hold the answer. And one of the biggest immigration raids in U.S. history. Now dozens of undocumented workers and their children are not allowed to work or leave the country.
We've all heard about the American dream. Well, this is the American nightmare.
This is the CBS Evening News.
Good evening. Presidential candidate Barack Obama is in Afghanistan tonight on a tour of the Middle East and Europe. Obama has long criticized the Bush administration for putting too much focus on Iraq and not enough on growing problems in Afghanistan. Violence is increasing there. And the U.S. Defense Secretary says he wants more troops sent in, quote, sooner than later. CBS News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Lara Logan is in Kabul.
The skies over Kabul buzzed with the sound of U.S. military helicopters today as U.S. presidential hopeful Barack Obama made his first ever visit to Afghanistan. The senator stopped in Jalalabad in eastern Afghanistan to meet with local Afghan leaders and U.S. military commanders for a first-hand assessment. The east of the country has become increasingly dangerous for Afghan and U.S. forces. Taliban and Al-Qaeda fighters have dramatically increased their attacks, strengthened by the sanctuary they enjoy across the Afghan border inside Pakistan's tribal areas. The safety and freedom these fighters benefit from there has been paid for in blood. More U.S. soldiers died in Afghanistan in May and in June than in Iraq. And more Afghan civilians have been killed in the past few months than the whole of last year. That's prompted fears the U.S. is in danger of losing this war.
If the resources don't come, I don't see any way that, that the U.S., the Afghan government, and NATO can win in Afghanistan.
Senator Obama wants to make Afghanistan the focus of the U.S. war on terror and has promised more aid money and more troops, at least 2 additional brigades. He plans to free up military resources by ending the war in Iraq and has laid out a timetable for withdrawal within 16 months. The Bush administration, which has strongly opposed a timetable for withdrawal, announced a timetable of its own yesterday. In a dramatic turnaround, President Bush agreed to a general time horizon for withdrawing U.S. troops that's linked to the success of Iraqi forces. Obama's plan has been welcomed by Iraq's Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki, who's due to meet with the senator in Baghdad as part of the current trip. Iraq and Afghanistan are just 2 of the 7 countries Barack Obama is visiting, including major European capitals like Berlin and Paris. Analysts are describing this trip as his international debut as presidential candidate, and some have said that it may be designed to overcome the impression that many Americans have that the senator lacks experience in world affairs. Forrest?
Lara, the top U.S. commander in Iraq, David Petraeus, is saying that it appears Al-Qaeda is shifting its focus from Iraq to Afghanistan. What do you make of that statement?
Well, that's been very clear from the increase in attacks, and this is certainly the central front to Al-Qaeda in their war on terror. They want to get Afghanistan back as a base of operations, and what they've managed to do is establish a new base not far away, just over the border inside Pakistan, and they clearly are intent on using that to drive the U.S. out of Afghanistan. It's also what a senior Afghan advisor to President Karzai and a security official told me just earlier this week, that there are more foreign troops coming into Afghanistan, and many of those are coming from Iraq. And so clearly this is a major issue here. The Afghans are concerned about it, and now U.S. intelligence as well.
Lara Logan, who is in Kabul, Afghanistan right now. Thank you, Lara. And a program note, Lara will have an exclusive interview with Barack Obama in Afghanistan tomorrow morning on Face the Nation. Now, before Afghanistan, Senator Obama stopped off in Kuwait to talk to the troops there. You remember all that grief Obama got for being a terrible bowler? Well, at a local gym, someone handed him a basketball, and he promptly sank a shot from way outside the paint. and made it look easy. You just have to pick your game. International talks on Iraq's nuclear program took place in Geneva today, with the U.S. sitting in for the first time. The outcome was inconclusive at best. Elizabeth Palmer reports.
Europe's foreign policy chief Javier Solana looked upbeat going in. So did Iran's nuclear negotiator Saeed Jalili and America's representative William Burns, although the White House emphasized he was only there to listen. On the table, a proposal known as freeze for freeze. That is a promise by Western countries, plus Russia and China, to freeze any new UN sanctions against Iran, while Iran promised to freeze any expansion of its uranium enrichment program, providing 6 weeks breathing room to plan more substantial negotiations. But when Solana and Jalili re-emerged 5 hours later, there was no deal.
It was constructive, but we didn't get still the answer we're looking for.
However, Solana said America's participation in Geneva had shown Iran a united international front.
Did Mr. Burns contribute, and if so, what or how?
He has contributed a lot.
Mr. Solana?
The gentleman?
His presence is also a very important contribution.
Iranians were watching these talks closely too, and many will be disappointed by the outcome. They blame high inflation and unemployment on tough financial sanctions against Iranian banks and businesses, and they know a diplomatic solution could bring big benefits. In a statement, the White House said it was serious about backing a package of incentives for Iran if it stopped enriching uranium. But it warned Iran's leaders they face more confrontation if they don't cooperate. As for Javier Solana, the only hope he could offer was that there could be more talks in 2 weeks. Forrest?
Liz Palmer in Geneva. Thank you, Liz. And back home, President Bush today called for quick congressional action on the plan to strengthen mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Some overstretched homeowners can't wait for relief. And in Washington today, they jumped at the chance for help. Thalia Shuris was there as part of our series, Changing Times.
They lined up in the hundreds, documents in hand, hope in their hearts that today would bring a solution to their mortgage troubles.
This is not your fault.
Some 3,000 people came to this hotel in the nation's capital, desperately hoping to restructure their mortgages and fend off foreclosure, with the help of the nonprofit Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America, or NACA.
People are working 2 or 3 jobs, but they can't afford these mortgages.
They're people like the Mendozas who are struggling to hang on to their home.
It's very hard to even think that we're going to lose this, that we've been working so hard to keep and maintain.
The Mendozas say they became prey to a lender who promised them one thing and changed the game after they had already sold the house they had been living in.
We originally asked for a 30-year fixed, and we were given a interest-only, very high mortgage.
Their mortgage bill ballooned to about $5,000 a month. A NACA counselor figured out what they could afford, $3,000 a month, and contacted their lender with that proposal. The organization says several lenders, including Countrywide and Citigroup, have signed on to help make plans like this work.
So the best scenario for these servicers is to accept the NACA restructure solution, reduce the interest rate from 10% to 5% and less, because you're going to get a reasonable return versus no return versus hundreds of thousands of dollars in foreclosure costs.
This is just the first stop for what is really a mobile servicing center. Plans are being made to take it on the road across the country.
Today has been a blessing to us. We really feel that we're going to be able to get a good outcome.
The Mendozas are waiting to hear whether the lender will accept the plan. But for the first time in a long time, they say, they're optimistic. Thalia Shuris, CBS News, Washington.
Entertainment news, the latest Batman movie has moved from good critical buzz to big money at the box office. The Dark Knight took in more than $66 million yesterday, breaking the opening day record set by Spider-Man 3 last year. Still ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, a Connecticut field of dreams. If you build it, they will tear it down. And when we come back, a formula for identifying troubled banks. The sudden collapse of IndyMac Bank last week alarmed more than a few consumers. IndyMac was the 3rd largest bank in U.S. history to go under. But how can consumers find out if their bank has potential problems? Turns out there's a secret formula, as we hear from Priya David.
We've been here since 4:30 in the morning. Have you?
The surprise failure of IndyMac Bank last Friday has many Americans wondering about the health of their own banks.
The economy has slowed down and it has caused problems for some banks.
The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which oversees the nation's 8,500 banking institutions, is reportedly watching 90 additional banks. But some Wall Street analysts, using a little-known formula called the Texas ratio, say as many as 150 financially strapped institutions could fail over the next 18 months. The Texas ratio is calculated by dividing the value of an institution's bad and delinquent loans by its cash on hand plus money set aside to cover loans that go bad. A ratio of 100 or higher means a bank is in deep financial distress. IndyMac's recent Texas ratio, 116.
I'm very angry, very upset about this.
The Texas ratios of other banks and savings institutions, once closely held by banking industry insiders, are now leaking to the public. CBS News has obtained a list compiled just last month of 50 institutions, many with ratios higher than IndyMac's. Those with the highest Texas ratios are smaller community banks, such as Colorado Federal Savings Bank with a Texas ratio of 709, Integrity Bank Shares in Georgia, 371, Stock Growers State Bank in Kansas has a 369, and Mesilla Valley Bank in New Mexico, a 362.
If you are a shareholder, if you are a borrower who wants, future loans, then you would be concerned.
But for most customers,
there's no alarm for consumers out there with money in community banks.
Mirsky points out, individual deposits up to $100,000 are insured. So if a bank fails, most consumers' accounts are protected.
Certainly the consumer has a lot of things to worry about these days, but one thing they don't have to worry about is their insured deposits in those community banks.
But only to a point. That $100,000 is per person. So if you have more than that in any account, it's best to move some of it to a different bank to protect your assets.
Good advice. Priya David, thanks very much. Well, rock and roll history repeated itself last night here in New York. Beatle Paul McCartney played a sold-out Shea Stadium again, joining Billy Joel on stage for 2 encores. The Piano Man was performing the last concert at the stadium, which is going to be torn down later this year. Remember, McCartney and his old bandmates performed the first concert at Shea, famously back in the summer of 1965, at the height of Beatlemania. Just ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, a small American town, a massive immigration raid, and the broken lives left behind. The tiny town of Postville, Iowa, is reeling tonight in the wake of one of the largest single immigration raids in U.S. history. Hundreds of undocumented workers were detained. Hundreds more are still being sought. And 2 managers from the town's largest employer are accused of running a false identity scam. And Postville is left to deal with a lot of pain. That's tonight's Weekend Journal. It was 2 months ago when 900 federal, state, and local agents swept down on a small kosher meatpacking operation called Agri-Processors, armed with 700 arrest warrants.
Searching for evidence relating to aggravated identity theft, fraudulent use of Social Security numbers, and other crimes.
By the end of the day, some 400 undocumented workers had been detained. Another 300 had fled with their families. In a single day, Agri-Processors lost 3/4 of its workforce, and Postville was on its way to losing 1/3 of its entire population.
Just destroy.
2 Agri-Processors managers with helping the illegal workers get false resident alien cards, knowing the cards were fake. Both men have pleaded not guilty. Agri-Processors owners say they had no knowledge the workers in their plant were being supplied with fake documents.
The type of people that work in this type of industry just naturally somehow appear. We did not solicit these type of people or try to bring them from anywhere.
Workers like Maria Lopez say they have few choices in their lives. Maria says she'll do what she has to support her family.
I'm going to ask God to give me the strength to go back and leave my children in Guatemala. Then I will come back here again. No matter what happens, I will risk my life and return.
And it seems many of the longtime residents of Postville think that idea is just fine.
Sure, they're illegal, but you and I would want the same things, I think, for our families.
We want a better life. We want to have nice American dream.
Trials for the two agri-processors managers have been set for September 15th. We'll be right back. These days, parents worry a lot about how to keep their kids out of trouble, especially when there's not enough in the neighborhood to keep them occupied. So what happens when the kids try to solve the problem themselves? Here's Bianca Solorzano.
It all began because 16-year-old Vincent Provenzano was tired of playing wiffle ball in the street. Nestled behind million-dollar homes, he found an overgrown abandoned lot, his field of dreams. He and about a dozen friends pitched in and went to work, clearing out underbrush and trash.
How long did it take you? It took us a good 3 weeks.
With some tossed-out plywood and one dad's leftover paint, the group built a 12-foot replica of Fenway Park's famous Green Monster outfield wall.
First impression was wow. How we could do this is amazing.
But for some neighbors, the field became a nightmare. They said it was too busy and too loud. The kids say it's all about having fun and they're not out to upset the neighbors.
He could stay on.
They posted field rules to keep things under control.
Don't drink, don't smoke, don't curse, don't gamble, don't annoy the neighbors, but that one, I don't know.
But the rules weren't enough. The council, which owns the land, decided this week to kick the kids off the field and tear down the Green Monster, which they said were illegal and unsafe.
It's really sad and shocked.
It's crazy. I mean, how they could do this to us, I don't understand. I mean, we're just out here having fun, playing ball, and now they're knocking it down.
First Selectman Peter Tessie says making the decision was the toughest day in his council career.
They erected something without going through proper channels. The neighborhood as a whole isn't conducive to the type of activity we were seeing.
And the neighbors?
I think the neighbors maybe could have handled it a little differently. They come across as angry, old, ogres who, just are against kids, and I don't think all of them are about that. Now it feels like a waste of time, but it was so fun doing it. I guess we're just gonna probably play back on the street.
The council says there are other fields the kids can play on, but it's not the same as finding and building your own field of dreams. Bianca Solorzano, CBS News, Greenwich, Connecticut.
And that is the CBS Evening News. Later on CBS, 48 Hours Mystery. And don't forget Lara Logan's exclusive interview with Barack Obama in Afghanistan tomorrow morning on Face the Nation. I'm Forrest Sawyer, CBS News, New York. Good night.